Um, we're supposed to have Fred from Fireman.
I missed something then.
2.
I had no idea there were assignments on last Friday.
No assignments. No assignments.
Oh,
No, you don't have to worry. There's we'll talk about that today, you know, sort of course expectations, blah, blah, blah. No, it's just that there was a gentleman down at the fireman community in Randolph going to join us, and I just texted him the the Zoom invitation, but we have not seen him yet. So I'm just going to text him again. All right. Wonderful. So I will figure out who's not here today, and I'll get a video to them. The good news for me, thank you. The good news for me is that nobody came last night who can only come on Thursday nights. So we will have a single group, which I'm very happy about. We don't have to bifurcate ourselves, which is great.
That's good.
And the people who couldn't do Friday sort of decided they can't do it in general. So, which is good for us. I feel bad for them, but you know they'll have their chance at some point, I hope. All right, so we have 2 new people. So or 1 new person right now. I'm thinking of Fred. So Susan, why don't you introduce yourself? And then we have a special guest, Sherry Leffert is here, and I'll ask Sherry to introduce herself once Susan introduces herself. So Susan, the sort of prompt questions are, you know, your name, a little bit about you, where you are, and what you think your sort of personal learning goal is for this process.
I can answer the first one. That's easy.
Okay.
I can read it right off the screen.
Actually. Oh, good. Yeah, there we go.
I'm Susan Jones. That much I can do. Where I am physically in life is in Watertown in my house. It's right next to the high school. I'm a retiree from, I retired from MIT, where I worked in the central computing for many years. I retired in 2006, so I've been retired for a long time. I'm an artist, and I belong to a studio in Newton called Turtle Studios. And I have, and the reason I'm here is because I have 2 degrees in Judaica, in one from Brandeis in Near Eastern and Judaic Studies, and then a master's from University of Washington in medieval Hebrew and Arabic literature. So, and I did them. I mean, I have those degrees because I am not a religious person. I've never been a religious person, but I am a Jew, and I wanted to understand. And I thought I wanted to understand why people were religious, actually, and I've never figured that one out. But on the process, I've done a lot of studying about mysticism and the literature of mysticism, and so I circle back in my life every once in a while, and now I'm going to be 80 in March, so this is another circle. That's why I'm here.
Love it. Love it. So someone else on the call, Susan, had expressed an interest in mystical literature, and so maybe we can figure out a way of making that happen, a little bit of exploration. So thank you. And you know, there's no need for a person to have her learning goals specified. at this point, it can emerge, or um, it can just be that that you want to be a part of this community of learners, and you can sort of participate in this and that and the other thing, and sort of figure out your way through. So there are two. So basically, at this point, I think, as I mentioned, we have there's six sets of six sets of learning sort of personal goals have sort of emerged, and I'm going to try to remember them without having to have them on the screen. So laning Torah, chanting Haftarah, or two Haftarah people today, prayer book Hebrew, biblical Hebrew,
That may be my.
biblical Hebrew, and leading services. And there was one other that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure it'll come to me. So Sherry Leffert is a member of the Worship and Study Minion. So people who come every once in a while to the Worship and Study Minion services on Saturday morning will recognize her. And she is our crack laning and Hebrew teacher in the Minion. And so I invited her here today to meet this group and to let us know a little bit about her, and then in this participate in this session today, and we'll so she kind of gets a sense of who the group is. So Sherry.
So hi everybody.
Oh.
Rabbi Jim invited me to come so you could see who I was, but I already know a lot of you. And even if you don't know me, I know you. So I have been actually been involved in Jewish education for a very long time. I taught Hebrew school. I went to Jewish Theological Seminary. I went to Brandeis. I have a master's in Jewish education and contemporary Jewish studies. And I've been teaching children and adults. And I myself did have a bar mitzvah, and I learned to do the Haftarah then. So I know I learned the notes from that. And then as an adult, one time in services, Norman Janis, the Rabbi Emeritus of Worship and Study, invited me to read the Torah. So I taught myself and have been teaching others ever since. Is there anything else I need to say? You are muted.
In case you hadn't heard, the official sentence of 2020 was good. So I don't know if Mayim heard me. So I apologize to everyone else who wants to hear it again, but the official sentence of the year 2020 was proclaimed to be, "You're muted."
Oh.
So I apologize. Now, of course, I forgot exactly. I forgot everything.
Rabbi Jim's going to organize this, but anybody who wants help along the way is welcome to contact me, and I'll be glad to help you.
It's so incredibly generous, Sherry. Thank you so much. And Sherry has a long history of teaching people to chant Torah and actually come back and then chant more Torah. So so I know we have the results to show that Sherry is very effective as a teacher, which is great. And it's extremely generous of you to offer your time and your help. Go ahead, Mayim.
Yeah, when I first mentioned to Rabbi Jim that I really wanted to learn to read Hebrew better and practice, Sherry, you were the next thing he said. Oh, I'll have to introduce you to Sherry Leffert. So nice to meet you.
So,
My ears were ringing.
Yes, exactly. Your ears were ringing all over Cambridge and Brookline, and all the way down to Randolph, as it turns out. So, Um, all right. So and then I also wanted to, unfortunately, she was not able to make it today, but as I think I mentioned, we will have a rabbinic intern, Rachel Talley Kaplan, who will be starting officially on February 1st. I'm, trying to cajole her into starting a little bit early so she can meet some of you. I think that she is going to be teaching the Haftarah group, and we'll see about we'll see if I can find either other volunteer teachers, or between Rachel and me, we'll handle the rest of the interests. Um, and so today, what I wanted to do was just sort of go over. I'm going to send you all an email with all of this information, so you don't have to take notes. It's actually not that much information, but just that it's probably worth paying attention to. It's sort of like a little bit of the nuts and bolts, and you 8 people will get it straight from the horse's mouth. Everyone else is going to have to read it. But what will be helpful is if you have questions about what I'm saying, or there's something that's not clear, you are now the guinea pigs, and I will adjust what I have to say accordingly. And then I have a little bit of a lesson that I brought along that seems very timely today. So I thought we could end with a little learning. All right, so so this is the letter. I think I'll just read it, and anything and after every paragraph I'll stop and ask for comments and questions, and you can let me know if there's anything that's confusing or otherwise needs attention. All right, so thank you for your enthusiasm for our Bar Bat Mitzvah program. I am very excited to partner with you and a variety of other teachers, Sherry and Rachel among them, on your learning and growth into B'nai Mitzvah. I also want to thank you for your patience and to request your ongoing forbearance as this program comes into shape. Given the reality of the pandemic, the multiple communities involved, and our commitment to individual as well as communal learning goals, we have not planned a one-size-fits-all curriculum. Instead, we will work together to develop a curriculum that works for us as a group, or even kind of, I thought at that point it'd be multiple groups, but it seems like it's going to be a single group, while remaining focused on each participant's individual goals. All right, so any questions about that sort of somewhat diffuse set of premises? And feel free to unmute yourself. Everyone, I think everyone is muted except for me right now. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment. All right, great. If not, I will continue. All right, so I have identified so far 3 principles that I want to have as the sort of foundation of our learning together. The first one is this: the teachers, with the exception of Sherry, of course, are learning along with you. I'm kidding about Sherry, by the way. That was a little Vitz. But the teachers are learning along with you, and in this, I have mostly in mind me and Rachel, but it probably does include all the other teachers as well. This notion is generally true in Jewish tradition, where teachers learn from their students, but it is literally true in this program where Rabbi Jim, that's me, like you, is studying toward his own bar mitzvah, and rabbinic intern Rachel Talley Kaplan is studying towards her rabbinic ordination this year. What we learn from you will enrich our rabbinates in significant ways. So that's number 1 principle. Number 2 principle is that each participant owns their own learning. So the various instructors and mentors are here to support you, teach you what they know, and help you overcome obstacles, etc. We are not here to grade you or to judge you or to decide whether or not you are ready to become a bar or a bat mitzvah. Right. So this is really self-directed learning, and we're here to support you in any way. But we're not teachers in like the school sense. There's no exams and there's no grading. Thank God. I don't mind making exams, but I hate grading. So, and principle number 3 is that this learning is a time-limited journey. So we will tentatively celebrate our siyum, which siyum is a completion ceremony, and what we're calling actually our bar mitzvah, right, or bat mitzvah, depending on our gender, right, on June, and I believe it's June. I had said June 4th, but it's going to be June 12th. Wait, no, I had said, I apologize. I had said June 5th, but it's going to be June 12th. The reason is because Rachel will have her ordination on June 6th. And so ordination weekend is not a good weekend for us to have our bar bat mitzvah, because we want her to be free to participate with us. So we will do it the following Shabbos. The Torah portion for that week is Korach, in case you were wondering. And I see Susan, wincing with horror, such a terrible portion, but it's the triennial cycle. So we'll be doing the middle of the portion. Go ahead, Yeva. You're muted though. You're still muted.
I had to find the button.
That's okay.
So my understanding of this process is that you generally, of course, it's designed for a coming of age type of process.
Right.
So you would do it closest to your birthday.
Right.
My birthday happens to be in June.
Oh, there we go.
So is it according to day, or is it according, I'm just curious from a traditional structural sense. Is it according to day, or is it according to week? Is it according to?
So traditionally, the way it would work is that we would find we would figure out what your Gregorian birthday corresponds to in the Jewish calendar, right? So say if I was born, for instance, on June 19th in 1968. I don't know off the top of my head, what day it was in the Hebrew calendar that year. But then you would, traditionally you would go to, so you would go to that Jewish date and then again transpose it into Gregorian to figure out when that is. So you could certainly do that and figure out. This is a year where the Gregorian calendar sort of runs a little bit early, so to speak, right? We have Purim is already in February, and Pesach begins in March, right? So Shavuot will long be over by the time we get to June. For instance, when I was ordained, Shavuot was like that weekend or the weekend after or something like this. So I've reverted to using the Gregorian calendar for this celebration. And Susan, go ahead. You want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I read that portion last night, just to confirm that it's not a happy piece.
No. There are unfortunately, relatively few happy portions in the Book of Numbers. It is a sort of a sad reality that and actually there's been really interesting studies done of the way that in many aspects the Book of Numbers is a kind of a mirror image of the Book of Exodus, right? That there's sort of not least of all in the way that when God in the Book of Exodus sees that the Israelites are misbehaving, God is sort of like an indulgent parent, right? And by the time we get the Numbers, God is already fed up and ready to rumble. That is it. I am done with these people. Yeah. So which is just a very interesting dynamic. So you take what we get. We take what we get, and and at least we don't have to deal with sores on our faces, which some people who get their Torah portion in Leviticus have to deal with. So
Mhm.
it could be worse, is all I'm trying to say. All right, so let me continue. Everyone who fulfills the obligations of this program, which, as you will see below, involve presence and participation rather than any academic expectations, will be entitled to celebrate with us. Some of us will meet our learning goals. Some of us might not. Either outcome is to be celebrated, as learning in our tradition is ultimately not about the goal, but about the process. So we will be learning together, right? Whatever we learn, by the time we have our siyum, we will be able to put, we'll be able to sort of talk about what we've learned, and be able to celebrate that, even if it's not necessarily exactly what you wanted. And I'll tell you a story in a minute. I told Mira and Susan, I think I told you last night this story, but all right. And then finally, I talk about the requirements. And there are two major categories of requirements. The first one is participation. As I said, each member of this community must participate and be fully present at all components of the program. These components include the weekly group meeting, which we are at now. Right, we will learn a series of topics, some chosen by me, others suggested by you, by the group, I said, actually. I will attempt to find guest teachers for topics that I am not fully qualified to teach. If I cannot find one, you're going to have to put up with me. And if you miss a weekly meeting, we ask that you watch the YouTube of that meeting on your device. So that's, so obviously life will not allow probably any of us to be at every single one of these meetings. But, obviously we will want to be at as many of them as possible, because so much of the learning really is about being part of this group, and sharing our experiences. There will be the second thing under participation is periodic meetings with your rabbinic mentor. And Rachel and I are still working out the details of how this is going to work, but there will be regular 30-minute consults. Probably at least the first one will be one-on-one, and then we'll sort of see what happens after that. Each session, the weekly session, is an hour. I generally try to keep all Zoom sessions to an hour or under, with the exception of Shabbat services, which if I could do it, I would have it be under 2 hours, but I can't always do it. Sometimes, Susan, the worship and study meeting a little bit, and that they like to talk, and they want to get their point across, and so I do try to respect that, while also trying to respect the need to stop.
That's what's good about it.
I completely agree. So much better than the kind of minion that just sits there and looks at you. All right. So and the goals of these one-on-ones are to really just an opportunity to talk about your spiritual growth, talk about your frustrations, talk about obstacles that have popped up, and to suggest resources that you might consult. Okay, so there'll be learning goal clusters. So I'm hoping to assign everyone to a group that will meet with a content specialist, probably either Sherry, me, or Rachel, to start working towards your learning goal in preparation for our service. And these groups will represent your primary support for learning and growth. And when I say that, I don't mean that the teacher will be your primary support. What I'm suggesting is that in an ideal world, right, we would find that everyone found what's called a chavruta, a study partner that you could work with to sort of hold yourself accountable for actually getting, sort of making the progress that you want to make. And also, to be honest, it's, since, for instance, the Torah laning people, the goal will be to stand up in front of a congregation and lane Torah, right? It's much better to stand up in front of your Chavruta and lane the Torah a couple of times before you have to get up in front of the whole congregation to do it. So it'll give you a chance to do some practice. And God willing, I cannot promise, obviously, at all, but God willing, we will be able to begin to gather again in small groups before the final Siyum. And we will, so that means that, whether it's in Cambridge at Harvard Hillel or in Brookline at CCB, that people will have a chance to actually lane from the scroll before the service and get used to that experience. And obviously, everyone else, people who are not doing laning, right? There's other ways in which a study partner can be very, very helpful. And then finally, this is the other thing, right? Is that additional learning opportunities. You may have noticed, as I have, that there has been this proliferation of learning opportunities online. So many, in fact, right, that I'm completely overwhelmed and can't figure out what to do and what not to do. So I have tried to be a little bit of a curator, and the conservative movement has had wonderful, wonderful programs, and they're doing another round of them, I think beginning in February. So I will make, either CCB or Worship and Study a sponsor again of those programs. So I really, but everyone here should be getting the Minyan Bulletin from Worship and Study or the CCB Shabbat Bulletin. And so I would encourage you to join as much of the learning as possible for these 4 or 5 months, whatever it is that we're doing, and just sort of make regular learning and ideally regular davening, meaning regular attendance at prayer services, just sort of part of your routine, not permanently, right? Just for the period of this bat mitzvah experience, to sort of give yourself the fullest immersion into Jewish life as you can. The only real way to feel completely grounded in, say, Jewish worship is to be in Jewish worship. It's sort of like, I keep on trying to convince my kid of this, right? You're never really going to get you fully comfortable with driving unless you drive, right? You just have to get in the car and drive around. And so davening is really no different. So if many of you already have most of you are connected in some way to Worship and Study. Here, I think Eva is connected to TBZ.
We do a service every morning.
Yes.
Boker Tov, and I am looking forward to being able to follow along better.
Great.
During that morning service, which I attend every morning.
Did you have a Shabbat morning? Do they do Shabbat morning services?
They do that on Saturday. Yeah, they have the Friday evening as well as Saturday morning. But at 8 o'clock, there's a Boker Tov meeting, and that is very helpful.
Good, perfect. And and Eva, you're also welcome, of course, to join the Worship and Study Saturday morning service too. And the only reason I recommend it is because that'll be the sort of basic structure of what we do for the bar mitzvah itself.
Okay.
So getting used to that service is probably worthwhile for you.
And during that service, I imagine you do the mourner's Kodesh. Yes. Okay. Because I am in mourning. I have.
And we try to do that. We try to do it twice. If we have enough people, by about 10:15, then we'll say the early one, and
right. Perfect. Okay. All right.
All right. So these opportunities are not. And also that I am working with Mariana, who was on the call last week, and and with one of my colleagues at Harvard Hillel to develop a potential Chevruta program with members of Harvard Hillel's students. And so these would be another additional opportunity for learning, depending on obviously your schedule and what you have, how much bandwidth you have. So obviously none of these things is required. They're just, but as with most things, if the more effort and energy you put into something, the more result and energy you get out of it. So I'm just here to sort of encourage you. And then the second requirement is called participation, and I suggest that you just reread the first one, and so you can just go back and review those. All right. So and the schedule now is like completely different as was here. Right. It's just going to be Fridays at 1 plus the additional times that are that we find. Okay. And then just I've already said this in my remarks today, but I didn't put it in the document into them. Now, please understand that a good deal of the learning for a bar bat mitzvah is the development of a community of learners, and you are less likely to feel a sense of belonging with this community if you're not able to participate on a weekly basis. So, to the degree to which you can actually be here live on Zoom as opposed to watching on YouTube, the better. All right. So, any questions? Anything that I didn't cover that I probably should have? Okay, great. So, Sherry, you want to say something? But you're muted.
Oh, Anne had her hand up.
Oh, Anne did.
I'm sorry, Ellen.
Ellen. Oh, Ellen, go ahead, Ellen. You're muted too. There you
go. Ever since Rosh Hashanah, I realized I don't have anything but a Torah, which is very old, not in any manner of worth, but just old. And I have the loaned Siddur from Susan Grant. So I think part of this for me and maybe other people too is creating a library of necessary texts.
Wonderful idea. That's great. Yeah, that's
because I mean, you talk about the book of this and the book of that, and I don't have any idea what I'm hearing.
Right. So, of course, the bad news is that we live in COVID, and one of the relatively few ways to get the books is through Amazon, which is there's issues with that. Although you can, the Israel Bookshop will send you books also, as will Brookline Booksmith. But unfortunately, the way it works is that Amazon has made it so that they can ship everything for no additional cost from what you pay. And the other stores are stuck having to charge you for the shipping. So
you can go into the Israel bookstore.
You can, but a lot of people are not willing to.
You want to.
The apartment. So, so that said, good news is that we live in the times that we live in, and I'll tell you right now about a resource that's online, and actually we're going to be using it a little bit later. Called Safaria. What happened at the chat? Oh, there it is. Sorry. So, Safaria.org. Okay, and Safaria.org. Everyone should go to Safaria.org and sign up and become, get a login and a password and all that sort of thing. And when we have study sheets or whatever, they'll always be on Safaria.org. It's really, and so Safaria is the word for a library in Hebrew, and it's a library of Jewish texts. Most of them are in Hebrew. There are a significant number of them that have translations attached. What's amazing is that the entire Talmud is on Safaria with the most recent translation made available to you. Go ahead, Mayim.
Are you going to send out some kind of notes, Rabbi Jim, with this
Yeah.
kind of thing, or do you? Okay.
Yeah. I'm just putting it on here now in case you.
I don't see it in the chat. I thought you said you put it in the
Oh,
chat.
I sent it only to Susan because Susan had sent something.
Okay.
That explains it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out because I sent it. What's up with it?
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Okay. So that is, so if I mention a particular text, you can go to Safaria, and if you're lucky, it'll be in translation. If you're not, it won't be. If you live at CCB, there's a bunch of materials in the community room of Dinesh. So if you're, so Mayim, you can get there. They don't let you in that building anymore. Oh, I thought we were still letting people into other
I
buildings.
don't think so.
All right, well, but it is there, so I can grab it and make Xeroxes when we need to. I also have a bunch of stuff. But in terms of your Jewish library, I don't think that since we have Safari, there's no reason for people to buy a Talmud or anything like this. I think if you have the money available, I think it is worth it to buy Robert Alter's new translation of the Bible, but it is very expensive. So, but it is worthwhile if you do have the money. If you don't, then any Bible is completely fine, and I don't worry about old or new translations because all translations are translations, and we almost always have to have recourse to the Hebrew. Alters is the best of them because he's so aware not only of the Hebrew but also of previous translations. And that's a very good place to start. And then
Does he have the Haftarot in there too?
No, not as Haftarot, just just as part of
So wouldn't each person need to have a
Chumash is a very good thing to have.
Right?
A Chumash, in case you don't know, a Chumash comes from the word for five, right? Chamesh, right? So it's five. So there's 5 books in the Torah, and so a Chumash is the 5 books of the Torah, and usually appended at the end of either at the end of each Torah portion, in Hebrew a parashah, or at the end of the book, depending on the edition, will be appended the haftarot, right? The prophetic passage that's assigned to each weekly reading. Sometimes those haftarot are related thematically, right? And sometimes they're related to the calendar. So it can be sort of random. So I see that Eva has the old Hertz. But she also has the Jewish Study Bible, which is a very nice book. Very nice book. And if you really want to be very scholarly, then you have the Biblia Hebraica. But unfortunately, that's only in Hebrew and has no commentary. So not very helpful unless you already read. And then we have what Anne has, right, which is which we call Plout. And Plout is the Reform Movement's Chumash, right, which has a wonderful, wonderful resource with so much interesting stuff, including a parallel type of sources from other ancient civilizations. Which is really amazing to be able to have that in a Chumash. The one that we use at the Worship and Study Minyan is Eitz Chaim, which is a little bit more squeamish about comparative ancient sources. But there is some sort of hint of that stuff there. But this also has some very nice midrashic commentaries. So the thing to know about Jewish books is that there's never any end to them. Right? Ecclesiastes said that, right? And Ecclesiastes was right, and is still right, right? So there's another recent commentary on the Bible by Friedman. I forget Friedman's first name. That is in a paperback edition, which doesn't make any sense to me that you'd make a Torah commentary in a edition that's likely to fall apart. But that's also very interesting. And then there's one called The Stone, which comes from Art Scroll, which is the sort of on the edge of Haredi Judaism, sort of ultra Orthodox type of Judaism. But despite the fact that it's ultra Orthodox, it's also quite scholarly. It's quite rigorous from a scholarly perspective. Until all of a sudden it isn't. So it can be a little bit confusing because you can be going along and it's sounding pretty accurate, and then all of a sudden the Song of Songs is not about sex. It's about the love of God for the Jewish people, which is great, and I love that midrash, but it doesn't kind of get the fullness of the text. So shall we say?
Thank you.
All right, so that's a great place to start, and this is one of the places where having a community is really powerful, right? Because clearly I'm a rabbi, so I've done a fair amount of reading but I am not the kind of rabbi who is also my PhD is not in Jewish studies, it's in Russian literature, so I have not read by far all the books that there are to read. And so probably many of you have read books on topics that we will be talking about that would be of great interest to the group. And so I encourage you all to share what you know about resources, because together we'll get a lot better picture of things than if it's just coming from me. All right, great. So without any, other questions before we move on to my little sermon for the day. You're gonna regret it. Okay. All right. Great. All right. So I'm gonna share Safari, and I'm gonna give you a little. Part of this is actually topical. Part of it is a little tour of Safaria. Can everyone see it? Great. All right, so this is what the Safaria text screen looks like. Hold on a second. Let's see. The log on screen is, let's see, it's just not that important, but I'll show it to you anyway.
Very nice.
All right, so usually this looks a little better. There must be something wrong with their server, but you can see that there are what's trending, what are the things that are interesting, right, for people right now. All these make sense to me. And then the weekly Torah portion, right, here are some what they call sheets. So there are study sheets that are just available. So this one, I don't know this person, but Nellie Altenberger, I don't know who this is, right? But you can see, right, she has put together, here's a little bit of a piece from the Torah portion. Here's some questions, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff like that on Safaria that you can use. All right. Here are the weekly Torah portions. Here's the Haftarah, right? In case then they got all these other things. So Daf Yomi is a movement where everyone who is in this movement is reading one daf, which means a page, but a two-sided page of Talmud every day. And so they described it as the world's largest reading group. And it takes like 7 years to get through. And then there's a whole bunch of things Yomi all over the place. So anyway, you can sort of see it goes on and on and on. There's all kinds of resources. So to go, but the one that's most important for us, hold on, I don't know what happened here. It all kind of just disappeared. There we go. Is you go up to here. Can you see my arrow?
Uh-huh.
The upper left-hand corner, as you're looking at it, the three dots, that will bring you to the texts. Okay. So if you're looking for a particular text, right, you can go here. So the question that was asked of me today, I had written sort of a poem / prayer in the wake of the terrible events of last Wednesday. And one of the things that I put in that prayer was, sort of a beseeching God in God's unity, right? Which is more or less the way I understand God, right? To help us figure out a way to come back into relationship with our opponents. Um, and one of the members of the Worship and Study Minion wasn't so super happy with this idea, and and said, "Is it a Jewish idea that we should love our enemies?" Um, and I assumed that that's what she thought I meant by coming back into relationship with our opponents, even though I don't think that was what I meant, but whatever. So she said, "Isn't this a Christian idea?" And so I said, "Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So let me go poke around a little bit and see what's on the internet about this." So what I found was actually somewhat interesting, that that the Hebrew Bible does talk about your enemies. It does not talk about loving them, right? The fact that I wasn't really talking about loving them either was, I don't think, important, right? But it doesn't say anything about loving them, but it does talk about them in pretty, I think, significant ways. So the first one that I wanted to look at, sorry everybody, was no, that's not going to do it. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on here. Oh boy. Sorry, everybody. So we're going to go to Exodus. All right. I think it's Exodus 20. I want to say 24. No. Maybe Exodus 19. Hold on one second. I'll tell you in just a moment. I can't do that way. Hold on. I apologize. One thing you'll learn about me is that I can never, ever for the life of me remember numbers, which is really unfortunate considering that everything is according to numbers. All right. So Exodus, it was Exodus 23. All right. Exodus 23, verse 4 and 5, right? I'll highlight it. When you encounter your enemy's ox or ass wandering, you must take it back to him. When you see the ass of your enemy lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless raise it with him. So the issue here, so far as I can tell, and by the way, please feel free to jump in with any questions or comments that you have. But it seems to me here that no one is asking you to love your enemy, right? But the Torah is telling you, right, that if your enemy, and especially your enemy's animal, right, is in surus, right, is in trouble, that you can't say, "Oh, that he's my enemy, I'm not going to help him." Right?
Well, it makes sense because the animal is a sentient being on its own.
Right.
And so therefore, providing a mitzvah for that animal has nothing to do with your enemy. It has everything to do with yourself. You've been given an opportunity to do a mitzvah, and that's
right. But what's interesting, right, is that you have to do that mitzvah,
yes,
right, even though it's going to benefit your enemy.
Right.
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 And so, the fact that that person is your enemy and you don't like him and you don't want him to have the benefit of your help, you're still enjoined, right? You're still enjoined right? So there's something about generosity, kindness, humaneness, right, that is valued above whatever feelings of enmity you might have for the person. And I think you're right, yeah, but it's very interesting, right, that it's mediated through an animal, right? It doesn't say, right, it doesn't say your enemy is lying under his burden. You have to help him up, right? Although I think, right, in a certain sense, right, the text kind of trends that way, right? That that it is quite possible that, you know, that extension of this principle might be true, right? And why might I say that, right? Okay, so so let's look at the next one, which is Leviticus 19. That's where I get this 19 idea.
Can I add something before we leave this
Please, yeah,
one?
go ahead, go for it.
I mean, I really like the idea that the animal is the mediator, because we know the role that animals play in easing human contact and interaction. But what I was also seeing in this is you may have an enemy, but your enemy's spouse or children may be perfectly reasonable human beings, and you really shouldn't be mean to them.
Right, right. And in a sense, right, and I think that the reason why I sort of go to this next one, right, I mean, and I can't take credit for this selection of verses. This is culled from a random series of searches on Google. But the next one that I come to, right, is Leviticus 19 verse 18. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Right? Love your fellow as yourself, right? We always remember the second half, right? Ve'ahavta re'echa kamocha, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. We don't always remember the first half of the verse, right? The first half of the verse is just as important, right? Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge, right? So even if this person, right, is your enemy, if you really dislike this person and wish he would just rot in hell, right? Or just, you know, sit there on the street unable to get up because his backpack has pulled him over, right? That in a sense, right, would be taking vengeance or bearing a grudge, right? Which we really, according to the Torah, should not do, right? Because even though he may be our enemy, he's also our fellow, right? Go ahead, Helen.
I just feel that that sentence is so difficult today.
Yeah.
And
Could not agree more, right? Could not agree more.
I mean, I would love to feel that way, but but what came to mind is in Christianity, if that was believed, I mean, is that a universal belief or just our belief?
Which belief?
That you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen.
Remember, right, that in Christianity, there's a, as in any of the great religions, right, there's going to be a variety of ways of thinking.
Right.
So, so did the New Testament come to uproot the Torah, or did it come to affirm the Torah? Right? I would imagine that on this topic, most Christians would want to say, right, that the New Testament comes to undergird the Torah or whatever, right, to confirm the Torah on this, right? But just as you said, Helen, this is so hard today. I don't know. I mean, even though I agree with you that it's particularly hard today, I'm not sure that it was any less hard last year, right? Or 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 200 years ago, or whatever, right? So, and I think that that's one of the, and we all know, unfortunately, that our own religion, as well as that, in our sister religions, right, can, even though it says right here, right, in black and white, it's, there are many texts that are hard to interpret in the Torah. This does not appear to be one of them, right? That we don't behave like this all the time.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that this is one place where commentary and a little bit of an instruction would be extremely useful.
Yeah.
All right, if you see your neighbor fallen somewhere, pinned under his car, you've got to help him, even if you don't want to. But not bearing a grudge,
Yeah.
I need help with that.
Right. I mean, 100%. And we don't have to go very far, right? I am very, very, like, in a way that I rarely am, personally disturbed and angered by the behavior of the new representative from Colorado, who tweeted out, Nancy Pelosi's location. Like, I'm deeply angry about that in a way that maybe is just sort of a placeholder for all the other things that I'm deeply angry about and I just can't articulate.
Well,
But it's hard for me to imagine not bearing a grudge
Well, one of the things that I have found is that those areas that I have the hardest time dealing with is the area that I need to learn.
Right.
So, which is why I'm trying to learn Hebrew.
Right. Yeah.
You figure that even if you figure, okay, it says I shouldn't bear a grudge, so I'm going to try not to bear a grudge. In the back of your mind is going to be, well, if I pick the car up off of him, is he going to stab me again?
Right. Well, right. And so this gets to the next text, I think, but before we get to the which is the last text, and I'll let you go very soon. I generally don't like to go over, but this I think is important, right? That is that this, I don't think that this means don't bear a grudge in the sense of don't remember what he did, right? Or don't protect yourself against him if he's behaved towards you in a way that was violent or otherwise hurtful, right?
Well, I think then that's another thing I need help with, because
not turn the other cheek, right?
if you have in the back of your mind what has gone on,
right?
Yeah.
It may be,
there's always something there.
Right. It may be though, right, that you decide, not because you bear a grudge, but because you are legitimately concerned about your own safety, that instead of going and helping the person yourself, you call the police and have the police help them, right? I mean, I think that there's, that these are obviously, there's a myriad of concrete situations that might emerge from these very general verses. Go ahead, Ann.
Bye. I have another meeting.
Sounds good. I'll tell you later. You can look at the rest. You can look at the end of the YouTube to figure out what you missed.
Thank you.
All right, great. All right, go ahead, Susan, and then I'm gonna.
Okay, this is a very specific passage. It's you should. I just thought maybe I should look it up in the Hebrew.
Oh, yeah, we can look at it in Hebrew.
You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen.
Right.
This is in Leviticus. First of all, there's no countrymen anyway, but it's countrymen. It's not like, you can't do it against the men of Shechem, for instance.
Or we can do it against the Russians. We just can't do it against our own people.
Right. But the specificity of it is important to notice.
Yes.
However,
grudge and being, a horrible person to anybody else is just fine.
However, here's a different way of thinking, and that is, our country is part of the world.
Right.
We are all earthlings together.
Right. Exactly.
And so therefore, just as Torah says, you're supposed to be responsible, and you have to take that. I think we have to expand our perception a little bit beyond our belly buttons.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, I think the sentiment is fine.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that it is very specific here.
Absolutely. And amcha, right, is a very interesting, here it's a mecha, right, is a very interesting word, right? Where do we put that boundary, right?
Yeah.
This is the question that we have all the time. Where do we put the boundary around neighbor, around people, right?
Oh, here it is, right here.
Yeva is saying we're all earthlings, right? That community is the entire world, right? Susan is suggesting it's Israelites and not the Shechemites, right? And so on and so, right? We can always, it's just the Democratic Party and none of those Republicans, right? Or do we include the Republicans that are, that aren't fascist? Right? I mean, I'm just obviously I'm riffing here. I'm joking. I'm not saying it. This is not serious political commentary. All right, so let me move to the final passage that I wanted to look at very quickly. And we'll get sort of a little bit again of the sense of how complicated this question is. So this is towards the end of Saul's life. Saul, as you may remember, sees David as an enemy, right? David is the guy that's going to usurp him. David is the guy that's going to become the king instead of Saul's son, right? And Saul several times tries to kill David, always unsuccessfully. And what's sort of interesting, one of the amazing things about the book of Samuel, which is, if you haven't had a chance to read it, it is, it's really a pinnacle of world literature in so many ways. But one of the very interesting things is the way that David repeatedly has Saul at his mercy, but doesn't kill him, right? And so Saul at the end says, let's see, this is verse 18. So Vayomer El David Tzadik ata mimeni, right? So the translation says, he said to David, "You are right, not I," right? But the more literal translation, I think that Alter translates it this way, is like, "You are more just than I am. Right? You are more just, right? You're a tzaddik and I am not." Right? A tzaddik meaning a righteous person. Right? Why? For you have treated me generously, but I have treated you badly, right? So even though I was your enemy, right, you didn't treat me that way. You have revealed how generously you treated me, for the Lord delivered me into your hands and you did not kill me. Right? If a man meets his enemy, does he let him go his way unharmed? Right? Clearly the way of the world is you see your enemy, and what do? Oh my gosh, here's my enemy. I'm going to dispatch him now while I've got him, right? But David behaves differently. David behaves in this case. Now, don't let me steer you wrong about David being a paragon of virtue, right? On the contrary, right? David dispatches many, many people in the course of his life. So don't take this as an indication so much about David, but just sort of in its taken in this little, it's in its own little context. Right? Surely the Lord will reward you generously for what you have done for me this day. Right? And so there's something here, right, about the value of not killing your enemy when you have the chance to do so. Right? And again, I don't want to make too fine a point of it, because as Susan points out, right, these are very specific situations, right? Saul is the king. And David has a very strong motivation not to gain the reputation as the person who gained the throne by killing Saul, right? He has a very, very strong motivation to keep Saul alive and make sure that Saul dies some other way, right? But still, right, from Saul's perspective, right, and we can sort of see, right, that there is some importance, right, to treating our enemies better than they treat us.
I think that's also being said by the phrase Black Lives Matter.
So say a little bit more, Ellen.
Because the desire is to make white people see what they have done, what they are doing, and it's almost impossible. But it's also the idea of not that this was Gandhi. You don't hit back, and if you're hit, then you're going to be hit again, etc. But it's all the And Black Lives Matter is especially pertinent, I think, because we are all in the same place.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting question, right? There is this sort of emphasis we see here, right? Sort of a hint, right, at the power of nonviolence, right? At the power of withholding violence when you could, sort of legitimately have made an argument that violence would have been appropriate, right? Yet David withholds, and he is not someone who generally withholds violence, right? So it's obviously a strategic move to withhold violence here, right? That somehow withholding violence is strategically powerful. And it is really interesting, right, that we have, the white supremacists, right, are so ready to be violent, right? And they did not attract the violence that the nonviolent protesters have attracted all year, right? So, which I think does speak, in a sense, right, to the power of not resorting to violence, right? It arouses a fury in people who have power, that you are not going to speak their language or act in the way that they act, right? So I do think that, Christian, not Christian, Hindu, not Hindu, whatever. I mean, I think at this point these are inheritances of the world, and I think that we as Jews, right, would be unwise to sort of say, oh, not destroying our enemies is a Christian way of being, right? We have to think about, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
So how would you apply these principles, taking chronology and time into account? That a child growing up now should not hate all German children because their grandfather was killed in a concentration camp,
Yeah.
or that a Black person whose ancestors directly or indirectly were held in slavery, but has otherwise on his or her own had a wonderful life in this country, use the past injustice as a way to hate the other.
Right. I mean, in my experience, right,
I'd never really put these together
right. I
quite
mean,
that way.
and again, I really believe, right, that it does no African American person, any particular good to reflexively hate white people, just the way that I don't think it does any Jewish person any particular good to reflexively hate German people, right? That the range of experience within Germany, right, during the war is such that there were many righteous Germans, right? And so to sort of blanket hate all Germans, just as there were, to take the language of Ibram Kendi, right, there were many people during the years of slavery who were actively anti-racist, right? And so who are white, right? And that's the case now, right? And so it's a very difficult conversation, which is, but anyway, we should stop. I apologize for keeping you so long after, but we, these and other types of conversations to be continued, and really appreciate you taking the extra time. And I will look forward to seeing you all on Friday and being in touch with you probably before then with a little bit of more information once I get to talk to Rachel. All right.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat
Good
shalom.
Shabbos.
Talk to you soon.
Shabbat shalom.
Rabbi Jim, would you just tell a word about your interfaith Shabbat, your special MLK Shabbat?
Yes, right. So we're having an interfaith Shabbat tonight that is primarily going to be run by the two rabbinic interns at Hebrew Senior Life's other housing communities. I'll be there primarily to play the guitar and lead some of the prayers, but it's primarily their service.
Okay.
And I've asked Mayim for you to get for them to give you a
Thank you.
copy. I'm hoping Marina will have a chance to get you a hard copy.
And then you're doing something on Monday, on MLK Day too.
Monday at 1:30 will be a interfaith interfaith service for Martin Luther King Day.
Cool. I'm really glad you're doing that. Is that Reverend Oliver going to?
Reverend Oliver will be there. Reverend Barbara Groover will be there, and Rabbi Sarah Pasha Orloff, my boss, will be there.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll
All
be,
right,
but again, I'm not taking the lead on this. I'm like completely swamped with you guys. So
well, no, I love this cooperation with the other learning
great.
communities
It's
that
great.
you're doing. That's just great. Thank you. All right, I'll see you later.
One of the benefits of the pandemic. There's not so many of them, but there are a few. So we'll have to take them when